Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the People Overview and Scrutiny meeting on Tuesday, the 3rd of September 2004. It's now just gone 7 p.m. Apologies for the slight delay in starting. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. My first duty as chair this evening is to ask if there are any apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Nicola Crunch, the Director of Public Health Sharon Stoltz, Councillor Deborah Arnold, who has been substituted by Councillor Cockshall, I believe, Ian Wake, who is away, the Director, and the Portfolio for Children's Services, Vicky Hartstein, although she's not a designated member, has offered her apologies. I understand that the portfolio holder, fellow portfolio, Councillor Hooper, is on his way. He was at another meeting which he's concluded and he's en route to us. I'd also like to put in the apology for Councillor Roy Jones, who is going to stand down from this committee and is transferring to another and will be, all being well, replaced following the full council meeting. That does mean that we will have a vacancy for a vice chair, and I'll just make the point, it's a request, a plea, because I think it would be right and proper. I have contacted the leader of the Conservative group. I really would hope, particularly as we have two very, very experienced councillors in the service, that one of them might be kind enough to step up, but we can sort that all out at full council. I think that is it, unless anybody else has got any apologies or messages to go with that. Okay, thank you. In which case, we will move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, as outlined in the agenda. It was the meeting that was held on the 25th of July. I've just got one, or probably a couple of things to add to the minutes, but has anybody else got any issues with the minutes that they would like to raise? Okay, the couple of things that I would like to raise during the meeting, and it is logged in the minutes, it's sort of on matters arising. If those of you that were here remember, we had a really good presentation by representatives of Young People's Services, and we did ask, or I asked, about the possibility of we asked what the impact was with the reduction of, the removal of funding for the Prince's Trust and the Duke of Edinburgh programmes, and we asked officers if they could look at the options that possibly could be for alternative provision as part of the People ONS remit, because it was mentioned by those officers and representatives of Young People's Services that the Prince's Trust, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Jack Petchey and other things were playing a vital role in helping our young people. But the message has come back is that colleagues within Democratic Services have advised our advisors that funding for the delivery of these programmes was considered as part of the budget cuts the Council carried out in August 2023. The delivery was considered non-statutory and provided a saving as a significant part of the funding related to salary costs of staff that deliver both programmes. From liaising with the service, and I'm reading the message, this relates to budget savings. It appears that this sits within the political arena rather than someone that scrutiny can have any impact on, which totally baffles me, because I think all of us have attended all sorts of training about the role of scrutiny, and how we can ask difficult questions and how we should ask difficult questions and ask for answers, but we're told we've now got to make it a political item and raise it through the appropriate political arena. So I just pass that on to members. I find that incredibly disappointing. Those services did a great job. And if we could have found any way to get even just one of them back, I thought it would have been great. But apparently that's politics, not council. So with that, is everybody minded to approve the minute? Oh, the one other addition to the minutes that I don't think is on your printed one, at our pre-budget meeting with directors, pre-briefing meeting with directors, I did mention that I had asked officers to make sure that our task and finish group, which is in place now, would at all times be assured of having the appropriate officer support, either in-house or on visits to site. And we were told that that would be looked into. It isn't actually mentioned in the minutes. I spoke to Claire. She was going to add it in, but at our pre-briefing, I had an assurance from Sharon Stoltz that there was no issue and that it would be absolutely fine, and that they didn't foresee any reason why that task and finish group would not get all the officer support it needs. So I'm sure, as we move on, we will see that and hope that that would be the case. So with that, I will move the minutes of the meeting on the 25th of July as an accurate record. Anybody second that? Who's there? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Appreciate that. We'll just get one other little thing out of the way before we move on to urgent business. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest to make this evening? Didn't think there would be. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to urgent business. There are a couple of things I would like to raise. You might question the term urgency, but I think this is the only place we can actually bring these sort of things to light. You will have all, I hope, received a draft copy of the new proposed all-committee pre-brief proposal, which is simply that at overview and scrutiny, well, I believe at all committee meetings now, the plan is, and particularly overview and scrutiny, the meetings will be opened about, well, an hour at 6 p.m. before the meeting. So in other words, we would have convened at 6 p.m. optionally, and that would have been a briefing from directors and an opportunity to ask questions. I don't quite understand how that works, but it has been a proposal that's been put forward. It is going to be trialled within the Place Directorate on the Place Overview and Scrutiny meeting in October. You say you've all had the paper that tells you what it is and what it's about. I remain unconvinced. I don't really see why we need to add another hour on at the beginning of a meeting when we have the option to add an hour on at the end if we need it. And I believe councillors on this council of all political persuasions do an amazing job. They spend an awful lot of time here. And, I don't quite see the reason for us to probably get here for 6 o'clock, probably have 10 minutes discussion, and then hang about for 45 minutes. Councillor
I find the acoustics in this chamber very difficult. So can we guarantee that any pre-meeting, if it's held in this chamber, will be mic'd up? Because it won't be recorded, presumably.
I think that's a very, very good point, and I will pass that on to colleagues in scrutiny support and also mention it to Councillor Byrne, so that as he's the chair of that trial meeting, that he makes sure that that is in place as well. I think it's a very good point. The acoustics in this building are not great. I've already expressed a concern off mic this evening about the new arrangements in the chamber, which you've now put a big 8-foot screen between councillors and members of the public, which I dare say isn't going to help any hearing. But perhaps Jacob may well be able to help us. It's fine, says Jake. Thank you, Jacob, who's sat there. That was the first point of interest as urgent business, and I did say I would raise it. So if anybody does have any comments other than Councillor Fisher's, which will be noticed, I would be grateful. I also feel, and again, it's not urgent, but I feel it's absolutely appropriate. Most of you will probably know by now that in November we're going to lose Ian Wake, our Director of Health and Adult Social Services, and I'm sure we will all pay tribute to him at the appropriate time. I think he's been immense. I know he was enormous when he stood in as acting CEO. I know he did an amazing job. I have absolute admiration for the man, and I will say it all again at the appropriate time. But I thought it was appropriate to let you know what's happening, given that Ian is going. The interview process, the job for it has been made. Decision has been made to have an interim director. It is a statutory post. I have a view on it, but it's a personal one. And the council is planning to appoint a interim officer, probably for 18 months to 2 years. The advertisement has gone out, that has been long listed, and a short list is being drawn up, and there will be interviews, I believe, in a week's time to produce an interim director. who would hopefully be in place when Ian leaves if it's felt that is necessary. But at the same time, I'm also informed the council is planning its long-term strategy for the management of the department and is starting to look at recruiting the permanent head for the service, which obviously they clearly think is going to take a long, long time. And that will almost run in tandem. To my mind, it's duplicity of effort. I don't agree with it, but better minds than mine have come up with that plan, so I'm sure that that's what will happen. But it's important, I think, that people know who's leaving, who's going, and how the system is working to replace them. So that's that one. The other matter of urgent business, and this is a little unfortunate, that I wished, I'm sure other councillors may have had this. I've had a number of complaints, issues raised, not just by residents, but also by operators of home-to-school transport provision, who have been very, very disappointed with what's happened over the summer. I don't know how many, what people are aware of, but we basically decided to join an Essex-wide collective for provision of the contracts for home-to-school. It was put in the hands of Essex, of an organisation, I think, which has its roots fairly deep-seated within Essex County Council. They have contracted out the whole service for provision to, if you like, be a third party, to provide other contractors to a firm, I believe, in Uttlesford. That firm in Uttlesford has now appointed people to start taking the kids to school this week. I know there's been a lot of concern from parents, or some, well, actually there has been a lot of concern from a number of parents about the provision for children to get to treetops, because these kids have been using the same people for a number of years. They've now got strange people to them. I'm not suggesting that the people who are providing the service are strange, turning up. In fairness, there is one of the service providers was doing a get-to-know-you 2 days, but I believe it actually starts after the school opens, so it's sort of getting to know you on the job. I just think, again, it's been, in my view, ill thought out, and I did ask for an explanation, and I raised it in our pre-briefing and our meeting, and Sheila Murphy was supposed to be here this evening to give us a briefing on how it had gone on, and I just said, we'll do it under urgent business, just a 5-minute verbal report, just if councillors haven't got any urgent questions, if councillors have had any complaints and they wish to raise it, or just the overview from the appropriate director. I've heard I haven't had an apology, and she is not here, so we'll just have to put that on hold, and I will note that I am disappointed with that. I should add, by the way, that the reason that Sharon Stoltz is not here, she's got COVID, so she's here for a genuine reason, but the department couldn't provide provision to actually put another deputy officer in to take her place. And again, I would got to say it's not actually made me jump up and down. And finally, and I should have stuck my head around the youth cabinet next door, those of you who saw at full council the presentation by Thurrock Voices, a group of young people which are part of the youth cabinet, who have been doing some absolutely fantastic work with corporate children in care. We're all corporate parents, and there was a day organised at Grange Waters a week last Friday, and those who sit on parent corporating or read the minutes will have seen the presentation, what it was all about. They invited us to go. I went along. I wasn't there a huge amount of time, but I was there long enough to see. It was just an amazing, amazing event. The care and love and attention that those supporters are putting into our corporate kids is fantastic. The services that they've got, the technology that they're harnessing so the kids feel that they're in contact all the time, absolutely amazing. And I have asked that they come and make a presentation to us about the work that they're doing, because, you know, it's very, very easy to not see the good things and to accentuate the negative and not the positive. And that is a really, really amazing piece of work by an amazing group of people, and we as councillors should acknowledge it. So I'm sure we will return to it, but I think it comes under the remit of this committee. And with that, that's my urgent business done. I will always invite anybody else got anything that they wish to add at this point that's not on the agenda, because this is your committee and you have the right to raise any issues. Right. Well, in that case, we will move on again, you'll be glad to hear that I'll be shutting up for a while, and we will receive a report on the Better Care Together Thurrock Integrated Care Strategy, the end-of-year report that is going to be presented by Kerry Armstrong. So over to you. Sorry, I'll tell you what will be useful, because it was raised today. Some councillors don't know who all the people are that turn up at our meetings, and sometimes you do a little round robin. It'd be really great if you just tell us what you do and what you link with Thurrock. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I think I've met most of you, but for those who don't know me, I'm Kerry Armstrong. I'm Head of Adult Social Care Transformation and Commissioning. I think I've been with the council since 2004, so quite a few years in adult social care. And my role is I'm responsible for the delivery of our transformation programme across adult social care, and also working with health and voluntary and community sector partners. And I'm also responsible for commissioning, strategic commissioning, and that includes obviously how we procure services, how we our customer finance, so all of the invoicing and financial assessments that we carry out, contracts and brokerage, so all of the placements that we carry out as well, and also, and I've probably forgotten one, but also micro enterprises and also oversight of our CQC programme. So quite a broad remit, but not adult social care field work. That's delivered separately. So my report tonight is around our transformation programme for health and social care in Thurrock. And some of you may have been around when we presented the actual strategy, the integrated care strategy, called The Case for Further Change, back in, I think it was 2023, and that came to what was at the time Health and Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny. It was also agreed by Cabinet, and it's overseen by our Thurrock Integrated Care Alliance, which is a committee of our Mid and South Essex Integrated Care Board. So it's a true partnership approach, and it sets out really how we're going to transform the whole health and care system locally to deliver a far more integrated, place-based and personalised approach to health and care. And I won't go on too much about it because people can have the strategy and have a look, and obviously I'll be available to respond to any comments about it. But really it's around setting out a strategy and then an associated plan for, say, delivering better, bespoke and personalised care, focusing more on prevention and early intervention to try and move people away from crisis support and getting in there as early as possible, so that prevent, reduce and delay agenda. Shifting service delivery, so the majority of what we do is at place in terms of in Thurrock, but also on a smaller geographical scale as well, so where possible delivering that around one of our 4 primary care network areas, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. We also kind of spend quite a bit of time trying to focus on how we kind of make the most of community assets and also strengths, as opposed to focusing on quite a traditional deficit silo focused model where people tend to be assessed and then they're delivered a service dependent on needs, and that service tends to be, or has tended to be in the past, fairly inflexible, one size fits all, and for some people that's resulted in a bit of a revolving door where actually they might have a number of complex situations that they have to end up going into numerous front doors in order to get a service for, none of which work together particularly well to deliver kind of integrated solutions. So people tend to go back and forth and round and round. And Kim's nodding because she probably gets lots of calls about that from people. So it's about trying to present something which is more personalised and actually delivers kind of less fragmentation and hopefully a more cohesive service that aims to improve people's outcomes. So this is really more of a highlight report of the first year of delivery, and it is a long-term strategic vision because, as you'll understand, transformation of the health and care system isn't a quick fix, but there are a number of things that have been done so far which I think really show the improvements of kind of what we're doing. And again, a lot of this is we haven't just started transformation, we've been at this for over a decade now. So a number of the things that I'll talk about are based on the culmination of several years worth of, whether you call it experimentation or test and learn or whatever, but experience of doing things, trying to do things differently and working in partnership and with communities to do so. So I'll just kind of go into, so you've got the report, so I won't kind of go through it in massive detail, but I will pick out some highlights and say if you want to speak to me or ask any comments about it either, I'll try my best to respond. So the strategy itself is set out in around a number of themed chapters, because health and care is made up of a number of elements, as you'll understand. So the first chapter, which I'll speak about, is around a new model of community engagement and empowerment. And this is about trying to, again, get communities far more involved, or ensuring that we reflect our health and care systems to be much more in tune with what people want and how they're kind of the nuances of different geographies. So I talked about how we had split Thurrock into 4 places around each primary care network, and actually in those places we're trying to build those community kind of networks to try and get an understanding of the priorities for those communities, but also giving those communities a greater agency in terms of being able to understand or drive forward how money is spent, how services and systems are developed, and making sure that that our systems respond to those needs in those areas, rather than it being just kind of across Thurrock. In terms of what we've been doing, we aim, whilst kind of a lot of the thinking's been going on around community engagement and empowerment over the last year, that the real work will happen towards the end of this year, where we'll kind of pilot what we're calling a community investment board in one area of the borough. And that's around, again, getting people involved in those communities together to try and think, or to try and articulate what the priorities of that community are, but also have greater involvement in maybe identifying how small budgets are spent, and actually being responsible for maybe delivering some of those budgets themselves, or coming up with kind of different solutions for delivery. So that's kind of in formation at the moment. In terms of community engagement, we also work very closely with our user-led coalition, who work with kind of communities and with users of services to kind of get their feedback and to get their understanding of how services are or are not working, and to ensure that we actually are developing kind of our services and systems around kind of direct contributions and direct engagement from users of services and of carers themselves as well. So again, there's a lot of work going on there. I won't talk in more detail because it is kind of fairly detailed, but just to let you know that work is developing. In addition, as part of kind of our work to develop and deliver kind of more kind of community agency, we have a really successful micro-enterprise scheme. And that's working with people who want to potentially set up their own businesses, small businesses. I think it's less than 8 people to be a micro-enterprise. And that allows us to offer services that are very bespoke around things that are eligible, so maybe kind of care and support, but also things that make a difference to people's well-being. So it might be kind of gardening services, it could be podiatry services, it could be even dog walking or looking after animals where people having to go into hospital, etc. It's a range of things that people need in order to actually remain living at home, and also to ensure that they kind of continue to be able to achieve that well-being and whatever's important to them. The other really important thing is it kind of gives opportunities to people who are in Thurrock to actually set up their own business, so it gives employment opportunities, and it's also given a number of opportunities to people who are out of the workforce because of things like mental health issues or maybe kind of caring responsibilities. And again, it gives them opportunities to actually set up employment and offer something within their community, and also be able to actually be employed as well. So we've got about, I think, 120 micros at the moment, and that's something that's really successful, and again is very much focused on what's required in those bespoke geographies. So moving on to chapter 5, which is around how we're looking at primary care services. Again, one of the things that we've kind of spoken about or brought to overview and scrutiny over the years is capacity, in kind of clinical capacity. One of the ways in which we're trying to develop that capacity has been obviously building primary care networks where those kind of GPs can share resources, but also setting up what we've called, or what are called, integrated locality teams. So there's one again in each of those 4 areas based around those primary care networks. And the purpose of those integrated locality teams is clinicians working with other frontline staff in those areas, forming networks to again look at how they can solve or work together to form integrated solutions to problems that may arise. So again, rather than actually using resources in isolation or being fragmented, it's looking at how resources can be used collectively to solve some of the issues that might be ongoing in those areas. And again, those kind of integrated locality teams are having and will have a very, very strong relationship with those community investment boards in terms of community priorities, making sure that they influence the work and the priorities of those integrated locality teams to make sure that we really are reflecting what communities want and need. So all 4 of those have been set up and launched now, and they've already been examples of successes from the work that those networks have been carrying out together. So they've only been in place for a short period of time, and they are now working on developing those priorities. And all 4 of the clinical networks have developed their own clinical strategies as well. So it's now about testing what those priorities are, how they're delivered, and making sure that they're actually delivered in line or kind of co-produced with communities as well. A couple of other bits are, and again, at different levels, new telephony systems being delivered across primary care to try and get people to the kind of professional they need to speak to far better, and to give people greater choice. And also the other point, the couple of other points are around Thurrock First, our single point of contact for health and social care, giving additional funding to help with referrals, and also a cardiovascular disease management and detection programme, which actually resulted in Thurrock being one of the top 3 performing areas in the country. So a number of, again, a lot going on, but a number of kind of highlights to bring to your attention. And all of this will be ongoing because none of it is kind of one-off stuff. Moving, and I suppose kind of talked about adults a lot. One of the important focuses for primary care around children and young people is kind of early years oral health, which is a real concern, I think, not just in Thurrock but nationally. So again, there's an early years oral health programme, again aimed at kind of working closely, particularly with family hubs, and working on things such as kind of teeth brushing and ensuring people have got kind of just the basics like toothbrushes and toothpaste to make sure that children are having kind of better oral hygiene. And in conjunction, it will kind of also work with food banks and places that we know that there are increased need, and obviously through schools. So really important to highlight that work's going on. Chapter 6 around population health management. Unfortunately, so Sharon's not here to talk in any more detail about this. But again, an awful lot of work going on around improving the health and well-being and reducing inequalities in health and well-being across Thurrock and within Thurrock's areas and communities. So again, a lot of really proactive work on working alongside GP practices around early identification and of of people with long-term conditions, and then management of those long-term conditions, which actually, again, Ian's spoken about in the past, about significant advances in doing that are massive reductions in obviously mortality and actually attendances at hospital, because those diseases are identified, prevented and managed far more effectively. So constant working with GPs across a range of those long-term conditions. Blood pressure, for example, is kind of a key indicator of that, and things such as atrial fibrillation, etc., and cardiovascular disease. The other, in terms of moving on, chapter 7, again, is around how we're shifting what we've tended to provide centrally to a model that moved out into communities. So quite a couple of years ago, we started to work with, probably longer than a couple of years ago, actually started to work with our social work teams, which would all have been based from civic offices, to move them out into those 4 communities of Thurrock. So starting with our early intervention and prevention teams, they've worked in those areas for a few years now, and they've built up very good ongoing relationships with communities and community organisations and volunteer groups, making sure that they go to places where there's high footfall. So rather than expecting people to come here, they're going out and they're actually improving access, just to information and advice. And for example, there's a really quite popular drop-in session that's held at Morrison's once a month, where not just social care, but a range of agencies, including alongside voluntary and community sector, go and meet and greet people who have got any maybe questions. They can do assessments there and then, and they can actually pull together to deliver integrated solutions, as opposed to people, again, having to ring up, trying to get an appointment, maybe being contacted 2 weeks, maybe longer later, and then having to go through the same process to maybe kind of speak to someone about housing or their benefits or a range of things. So all of that's been happening, and over the last year or two, we've moved. Even within social care, we had different teams doing different things. So you might come into one team and then have to be referred to another. We've tried to reduce that, so even our social care teams are integrated. So people go through one front door, and they should get the help and support they need, and not just for social care, but it should be for a range of things, such as whether it's housing. I'm not saying this all works perfectly at the moment, but could be housing, could be around community nursing. It could be a range of things that person needs that they should be supported to get help for in an integrated way. So all of that is going on. Not saying there's more work to be done. There obviously is, but actually I think, and hopefully, people are saying or reporting back that actually our approach is a lot better than it may have been a few years ago, in terms of how we work together and how we actually are responding to people and what they need. So I'll move on from that, because I think I've talked quite a bit. Just to say that we're constantly trying to improve the way we work. So in terms of, rather than just lifting and shifting what we have here out into communities, we're trying to look at how we do things differently. So we're constantly looking at how we can bring people together and focus on delivering differently to kind of problems that arise. One example is our complex housing improvement programme, which has been really, really successful. And again, people who had mental health issues, were at risk of eviction, had substance misuse, probably were turning up at A&E numerous times, and again were these people that would be going through that revolving door. We brought a team together with all of those different agencies, organisations working together, kind of threw the rule book out of the window, but not obviously as long as people were obviously adhering to the law, not breaking the bank and keeping people safe, then actually we wanted to give them the freedom to actually test and learn doing things differently. The results of the work has, we think, resulted in over kind of £500,000 saving per year just for 5 people. And that's kind of working differently. And that's actually about working with people in the way that actually works for them. So not expecting them to come to an appointment, but actually going to them, and actually going to them and dealing with a range of issues at the same time. So hopefully maybe we'll bring something back on that, because that's been a really interesting piece of work. I mean, we're now looking about how we mainstream and scale up that work, because there are more people than obviously the people that we've identified and worked with so far that are needing that kind of approach. So experiments such as that are being tried and tested all the time. And the reason we say experiments is because basically no one's probably tried the things that we're trying before. So it's a bit of a leap of faith, but actually, if we do the same we've already done, we'll get the same results we've always got. And actually, it's worth taking, it's not a risk because it's kind of, it's small scale, but it's worth taking a bit of a punt and trying different things differently, even if they don't work, because there'll be learning that we'll gain from that regardless. So empowering our staff to do things differently and try different approaches. Just a couple more things. Chapter 8 is around, again, how we look at integrated support in the home. So what we normally refer to, or what you'd hear as home care or domiciliary care. But also things like community nursing that go into people's homes. We were anxious to try and move away from quite a one-size-fits-all time and task approach, where we tend to have providers that go into someone's home, they perform a task, they have half an hour or whatever, and they come out, and that's it. We wanted to try and shift that approach so it was more flexible. So it might be that it went in one day and actually the person needed a bit longer, or actually they needed something else doing, or actually that time could be banked to another occasion and used flexibly. We also wanted to use it as a way of giving better prospects, but it being more attractive for people to come into a career profession as well. So trying to actually get some variety and trying to lead the carer profession into different kind of possible career pathways. So we've developed things like blended roles, which is care staff taking on things that health staff normally carry out. So you've got less people going in and out of someone's home. So we're training staff at the moment to deliver insulin, which is normally done by nursing staff. And there'll be other things, and we've got a nurse that we've just employed to work alongside us to make sure that obviously staff are competent in doing that, but also to identify some other things that they can also do. Again, it's better for the individual because they've got less people coming in and out of their home. It's good for continuity, and it also it provides a more attractive career prospect for staff who we might want to attract into a carer profession. I think that's probably kind of enough on that one. Chapter 9, again, for people who can't live in their own home and then are moving into specialist housing, so either residential or supported accommodation. Again, we're reviewing how we do that. So we've just carried out a review of all of our supported accommodation, which provides supported living for mainly people with mental health or learning disabilities, tend to be working age adults. Some of those people will remain supporting that provision for the rest of their lives, but for a number of people the aim is to get them to the point where they can live independently. We're reviewing that just to see whether there are different ways of doing things. So could someone be supported in their own home but with more of an outreach type approach? So we're going to be we've just done the review, and we'll be developing a strategy off the back of that which will identify how we'll commission differently. And again, we might do some of that kind of testing and learning and experimentation just to test different ways of doing things. And also working very closely with providers to kind of work with them to try different things. The other thing I didn't say actually about the domiciliary care is we're just going out to re-tender our domiciliary care contract. Normally we'd go out and we'd tender for X number of hours, which would be delivered to X number of people. What we're doing now is we've extended the contract for a greater period of time. so we can encourage greater investment for providers, which will also in turn be better for workforce and continuity of workforce. But it will also enable commissioners to work with providers to actually develop what the service looks like over the life of that contract. So normally you'd have the same service at the end of the contract as you would do at the beginning. We're actually developing something very different. And actually this is quite, probably doesn't sound it, it's quite innovative in terms of commissioning terms to actually have a contract specification which is far looser in terms of the expectation is that providers will work over the life of that contract to actually redesign, potentially redesign what they've actually what they've actually tendered for at the beginning of that contract. So we'll be working with providers very differently to try and shape a new approach to, again, delivering domiciliary care around things I've talked about, around blended roles, around kind of being more flexible, around delivering better outcomes for people. We're also, and again, this has been to ONS and Cabinet before. We're developing a new plan for a residential care facility, which again will provide capacity for both residential care and intermediate care. So where people maybe need something in between hospital and going home, or maybe kind of they can't live at home for a period of time and they step up into intermediate accommodation. Again, we're looking at kind of different ways of providing this apart from traditional care home type approaches. So we're basing the model on self-contained flats, and we're also going to be looking at different ways of actually providing staffing to people. But the main thing is that they will have their own property or their own front door whilst living in a residential care facility, which again is quite new. But we're working on that as well to see how that will work, and also working on plans to see what the design will look like as well, and how we can also open up maybe a cafe facility to the broader community as well. Finally, you'll possibly be glad to know, Chapter 10 is around how we will just govern the delivery of that strategy. So we've got an integrated care alliance who oversee, so I think I mentioned at the beginning, they're a committee of the Integrated Care Board. They oversee the whole strategy and its delivery, underneath which we have a number of themed boards who are responsible for different chapters and ensuring that they are delivered. And so there are work plans and milestones that actually govern how this is delivered. As this is about this chapter is also about commissioning, and because my remit is also commissioning, I would also like to say that we've also developed an integrated commissioning strategy, which is just about to be signed off. And again, under that will be a number of different mini strategies, delivery plans, which will focus on how we are again delivering commissioning, so externally provided services and integrated services as well for a different cohort, so older people, working age adults, which will include mental health, learning disabilities, etc., and also supported and specialised accommodation. So again, that will be in this year's, starting to be worked this year, but the strategy is complete and will be signed off. Obviously, all of that, in terms of how we take it forward, will be worked through with people with lived experience. And we've also already done so with our carer strategy, which we launched. We worked very closely with Kim and Health Watch and also User Coalition to launch that strategy. Gosh, I think it's about 6 months, might be longer, 6 months ago now. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to open it up to see if there are any questions. And hopefully that made sense, but if not, please ask me.
Thank you for a very solid piece of work and a comprehensive presentation. Has anyone got any questions? Yep, we'll start with Councillor Johnson and then Councillor Fish, and I'll keep my eyes on you all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kerry. You obviously talk very passionately and confidently about this. And the actual report is fabulous. I'm really happy with the flexible approach, can help both the users and the workforce. Just under risks, I mean, there's two of them there. The latter one, the strategy fails to deliver the expected outcome. Well, that's always a risk. But the one above it about the external marketplace not being able to develop quickly enough, We've been doing it for a while now. Are you any further down the line to give us an update on whether that is getting there or not?
So I think the fragility of the workplace is, of the marketplace is one of our most significant risks. And I think in the past, obviously we've had quite significant provider failure, and no one wants that. I think one of the reasons we needed to actually develop a strategy looking at a completely different approach was actually to try and get some more stability around the marketplace, because I said doing the same as we'd always done would get the same results we always got, including, you know, not doing anything really about market failure. A couple of things. I think firstly, we work very, very closely. We've got a very good relationship with our providers, and our contracts and brokerage team have worked with them closely, and actually we are providing care very, very well now to domiciliary care and mostly residential care. There are some kind of concerns about availability in residential care, but actually the market is moving and fluid. In terms of how we're then shoring up through this strategy, I think that the new contract, for example, that I spoke about around domiciliary care is one example of where we're heading. So we did quite a bit of work, soft market testing with providers, gearing them up to the fact that actually what we'd be expecting would be something different. So it wouldn't just be time and task, it would be shifting away, but actually rather than going from day one and saying we want you to deliver a very different model, which I think would have been very difficult and actually not improved stability, we've actually, you know, I think made a common sense decision to say it may look the same from day one, but actually what we expect is for you to work with us over the life of the contract to actually develop something different, which hopefully builds more capacity, is more attractive to carers, and because it's a longer period of time for that contract, just allows providers to invest more because they've got that financial stability of 10 years rather than 5 or 6, for example, which makes quite a big difference. So I hope that responds to the question. The other thing I suppose we're doing with the integrated commissioning strategy is, again, that will help us to, and again, I know it's stuff that we are going to do as opposed to have done, but actually relook at the market and look at how we develop different approaches that aim to build not just flexibility, but capacity and more surety into the marketplace. And micros is a great example of how we're actually adding flexibility because, say, with 120 odd of a range of different providers, it's really providing kind of a great kind of alternative to provide kind of choice and control for people whilst kind of encouraging local people to have work opportunities. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it did. I mean, yeah, external market failure is always going to be a risk. I just really wanted your professional opinion as to, do you think that the market is understanding what we're trying to do now and that they're coming on board with it more? And yeah, it's never not going to be a risk, but yeah. Yeah,
I mean, obviously I can't say too much about the tender process at the moment, but we did have more applications than we were actually expecting, with a large number of those being high quality. So I think from that, actually, I think obviously the longer contract period will be attractive to people, but also the opportunity to work with people differently, and the way that obviously we will score that will be making sure that they do understand and they are able to deliver on that. And we did do quite a bit of, the commissioning team did do an awful lot of, say, soft market testing to make sure people were aware of the direction of travel, and also so they weren't coming in cold or not really knowing what was expected.
Councillor Fish.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few questions and comments. So the first one is about the Community Investment Board that you mentioned. What would the membership be like on that?
Pass. I think that's why we're wanting to pilot something. So our community engagement and development team are leading on that piece of work. So they will want to work, and I think they're going to be working alongside an organisation called Collaborate to identify what the kind of things that you know, what membership looks like. obviously involvement of ward members, you know, and how the general governance works as well, and also enabling people to have the skills and capacity to deliver what we're asking them to deliver as well. So I probably can't give you a detailed response, because I think part of the pilot will be to test out that exact thing. You know, what should they consist of? What do they look like? But I think there are examples where other areas have developed the likes, and I imagine what we'll be doing is actually looking at kind of those as examples of what membership, for example, could look like and how they could operate. So I'm sorry I can't give you any more detail at the moment.
So, are we talking about people who represent other people? So, a representative of, say, age concern or something like that, or are we talking about particular individuals that through their own experience, they're experts by experience?
I think we'll have to have both, to be honest. I mean, I think we'll have, obviously, through a user-led coalition and also through Health Watch, we all, and obviously for those at CVS, we try and tap in as much as possible to those organisations already. But in terms of looking at communities and the makeup of those communities and how they are best represented on an investment board, I think there will have to be a mix, and each one will look slightly different, because actually the profiles of those areas will be different. So it may be that actually, and again, that needs to be worked out in terms of how do those relationships between representative organisations and individuals in communities work, where do they sit, how are they represented, how do they work together, how do we ensure that the community in its entirety is represented, and how do we make sure that represents the demographic and the priorities of that community as well. So again, I'm probably not fully answering, I'm kind of surmising how we'll do it, but I think you're right in saying that actually it will have to be a representation from those groups, but what that looks like in terms of the mix and how that, I think that's the whole point of actually the pilot, and I think it will take quite a while to actually work through, and I imagine there'll be probably some changes on the way as well, because what you start with, once you kind of start going, will change, and communities change, so you'll have to review membership as you're going along to ensure that it still represents the community properly and those issues.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll have an update on those kind of issues that are contained within the report and strategy as time goes on. So then some observations, really, because as I was reading the report, I'm thinking, how does this work for me? Because I'm somebody who potentially can use those services in my situation and have used those services in the past. So I think this strategy is definitely on the right track. Something like the micro enterprises, I can't speak highly enough of them because I've used a couple of those, and I think they're brilliant. I think the way that they work is brilliant because they are small businesses. When you contact them and you need their service, their help, they have a very kind of human approach. You don't feel like you're talking to a huge conglomerate that, you know, doesn't really care about you. And they really do work very, very well with individuals, I think, that need their help. Thurrock First, I think, works very well as well as a single point of contact. When I've had to use them, the people that I've spoken to have been very helpful, always directed me to the right place very quickly. And the concept of the one front door as well, I think that's brilliant, because I remember in the past, years ago, when we were looking at setting up social care and what the problems were, people were saying when you become disabled or if you develop a condition, you have to suddenly become an expert in your condition. And you need to know all of the different contact details for people and all that kind of thing. And it's just an extra layer of stress and worry on top of your situation that you didn't ask for, it just happened. So to have one front door is going to be so much more helpful to people. So yeah, the other thing, as I said before, hopefully this is going to come back to us and we'll be able to scrutinise how it's developing.
Thank you, Councillor Fish. Councillor Leakey.
Thank you, Sherry, for a very brilliant transformation agenda. My question will be on chapter 6 in terms of health. You talked about, having like GPs being involved in health and how that's going to be coordinated. So I'm looking at how are we going to have GPs to be involved when we have to, look at how to transform health and well-being of the, of Thurrock, or people who are in travelers' sites. So how are we going to coordinate that and get them involved? And then the second question is about single point of access. Where is it going to sit? Is it under social care or health? Are we talking about social care or health? If you're going to have a single point of access, where is it going to sit?
So in terms of GP involvement, we're already working very closely because we can't transform health and care without those clinicians. So the development of those 4 integrated locality teams is absolutely working in tandem with those primary care networks in each of the 4 areas. And the reason we've got 4 areas, we've split kind of health and care into 4 areas, I know that won't be recognised by communities necessarily, but actually so we can work around those 4 primary care networks and make sure we kind of work with those clinicians. And what we're doing through those integrated locality teams is identifying common priorities that actually we can work on as a system. So, as we know that people turning up at a GP surgery don't necessarily need a clinical solution. Actually, the solution they need is maybe clinical, but actually it could actually be a result of the fact that their housing hasn't been resolved, or that they've got kind of another issue that needs resolving. And actually, if that's resolved, then actually they won't need to come to the GP anymore. So actually looking at individuals and the root of the cause of their issues and how we can then work together as a system to kind of respond to those is really, really important. And also just working alongside GPs to identify what community priorities are and making sure that we're able to respond. So it's work in progress. It's not perfect, as I'm sure you hear from your constituents, but I think it's kind of heading in the right direction. That the integrated locality teams have, or we try, and I think some of them have even got over 200 people membership, have got all frontline organisations, including voluntary community sector, working in those areas, coming together to try and actually collectively come up with solutions to some difficult kind of issues. And we need to work now, obviously, with people with lived experience far more closely to again identify how we can change what we've got to deliver differently. And so that will be done through those kind of integrated locality teams. The second point, sorry, you need to remind me of your second point. Both, really. It will sit within geography as opposed to with. So we've already got Thurrock first, which is a single point of access to social care, community health, and mental health. But actually, what we want to do is actually in each of those 4 areas of Thurrock again is through again all of those frontline services working together. What we want eventually is it shouldn't matter where the person ends up. They should have the network and the connection. So actually they need a solution which requires the input of social care, mental health, primary care, whatever. They're not actually pushed to 3 different doors. They're helped there and then, or actually we bring those professionals in to help with that solution. So for me, it's not whether it sits with social care or health. It's about actually it shouldn't matter where someone goes. If they're in their community, or even if they're not in their community, but if they're able to access it locally and they're able to get what they require. But it's not perfect at the moment.
Councillor Panjat.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you for the detailed report. I'm having page number 13 regarding this chapter 5, transforming primary care. From the second para, new telephone system have been introduced into primary care GP practice in order to improve the range of options for patients, contact and access. This delivered on a digital platform allows practice staff to directly assist patients is not only making appointments to see GP, but also directed to the most appropriate professional based on the specific request. For example, pharmacist, practice nurse, social prescriber, etc. So I'm having 3 questions here for me. Before and after introducing this telephone system, what is the difference we can see, like in performance-wise, how much we have increased the number of appointments before and after bringing this service? And also, I have a second question. We mentioned that here in this report, one GP practice added this wide range of additional services. So can we know which GP service introduced this system? And my third question is, here they mentioned 130 different community languages are available. So what are those languages? Thank you.
I'm probably going to disappoint you on some of this because the person in the know in terms will be primary care or our local Thurrock Alliance, but obviously they're not here to speak to it, so I may have to come back on some of this. But in terms of performance, I'll have to kind of get back to you in terms of that question, but I think just from people being able to actually get through to the right person as opposed to going through the wrong person and then having to make another appointment to get through to the right person, then actually that will be, obviously that will free up capacity. What I can't tell you is actually by how much, so I'll have to get that for you. The same, I don't know which GP service, so I'll have to come back to you on that. And I couldn't begin to name all of those 130 languages, but I'm sure I can find out which surgery and which language, a list of which languages they are if you want me to. So I'm quite happy to respond to you personally or respond through the chair or Democratic Services to get you a fuller response to those 3 questions.
Thank you.
That would be great. Actually, yeah, if you could do that, that would be really, I mean, oh, sorry. So we'll just on that, just, yeah, please do. And if you pass it on to Claire or Callie or Luke, then they will circulate around and we can actually incorporate that answer as a written answer to the minutes so it goes into the public domain as well. Because I think it's important that questions are seen to be answered, if that's okay with yourself. Do not worry. I'm really grateful for you being here and what you've said so far. Councillor Coxhill.
Oh, thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I can give some information towards that question.
Feel free.
From last year, it was one of the last things I was doing as portfolio holder. It's the Purfleet Care Centre that have trialled the service. I know there was a number of issues, teething issues, at the point. By the end of May last year, they were actually doing an audit to actually check about how it's actually impacted. There is that issue of digital and online, but the principle remains the same. It's actually very good, the fact that you can say that you've got back pain, and instead of going to see a GP, you can be directed straight away to the right person. It's something I'm quite impressed and quite looking forward to primary care rolling out across the borough, but it's just getting that teething issues of sometimes you ring up, sorry, you can only do it online, and then the phone gets put down. There was a bit of that, but that's something just as a background. I know if Kerry wants to go over a bit more, but there is some context at least for the committee straight away.
Thank you, George. I've actually got a couple of questions, but I would like to just take the opportunity, if I may, and if you do, you can see me looking at you, Kim. From a Health Watch was mentioned several times, and very much they're our sort of eyes and ears on the ground. And probably no one is more qualified to sort of give an overview of what's gone on and how you see this moving on. So if you wouldn't mind as sort of outside looking in or other way around, I'd be grateful if you could, if you have any observations you wish to make.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if everybody knows, but Health Watch is an independent organisation. There's 153 of them across the country, so every local authority area is charged with having one. And we speak to all of the communities around their lived experience of health and social care services. So that's down to GPs, hospitals, we do from children right the way through. There's no age limit to the work we do. We have been very heavily involved right from the very beginning on the Better Care Together work. So we've watched this through and we sort of, our role within that is to make sure that people's voices are heard. So when the decisions are being made, when the ideas, when the chapters are being written, we very much gather those views of people to say, how do you think this will look, and what would be your expected outcome? What would be a good service for you? What do you need, what you don't need? And we are able to fill that in, fill that bit for them. We also, at a lot of the meetings, we bring along either patients or people that have used a service who tell their own story of how it worked or how it didn't work. It isn't all bad. Sometimes people have a fantastic experience. It's about making sure that's replicated across. The stuff around the GPs, obviously we pick that up all of the time. The amount of calls we get a day around GP access is phenomenal. There is some really good services in there. It's people understanding that when you're asked what your problem is, it isn't just somebody's being nosy. It isn't just that they're sitting there. These staff have had training to identify the right place. So if somebody is, as they call, a frequent flyer, they're in week after week after week after week, or phoning week after week after week, probably in the background they haven't got a health problem at all. It's probably something else entirely. It could be to do with their housing. A lot of the time it can be domestic violence, and they just don't feel confident enough in those 5-10 minutes to disclose that. And that's where the social prescribing comes in, which is a project that sits under one of my projects. And they talk to people. They can give them an hour of their time. They don't get rushed through, to talk about and put a plan in place about what will help them. As I say, it could be housing, it could be debt, it could be gambling, that they're addicted to gambling, it can be abuse, anything at all. And then they can channel them into the right services within the voluntary sector and the support, which brings them away from health, which then allows patients who genuinely need health input. So a lot of what they're trying to do out there is really good. Working together within the Better Care together, now they're all linking in with each other. And now GP surgeries themselves and GPs actually know these services are out there. They never knew. I can remember in the early days of Health Watch, literally walking around the borough with a great big trolley on wheels full of all sorts of leaflets and information, and saying to the GPs, I can leave this with you, or you can take our number and get the patients to call us. It was them trusting that there was more out there, and I think we've moved on in leaps and bounds. There is still room for improvement. We all know that. There will always be people that will fall through a gap. But what we need to do is to make sure that when those people fall through, there's somebody down the bottom waiting to catch them. And that is becoming more and more obvious to professionals that they need to do that. So that is my overview.
Thank you very much. And again, please pass on thanks to all the members of your team, because I know a little bit about the engagement in this, and I know a lot of your people have had real good input. And it's that bit about, you know, there's a risk, it's new all the time, you're trying things out, it's a living experiment, and the fact that you've got so many local people engaged in that living experiment will cut down the number of mistakes, and when a mistake is happening, it will get spotted early. So, on behalf of the residents, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say we've got a lot of Health Watch champions out there. They'll all be in your constituencies. You'll find them, and they are the ones that are the voices and the ears, and they will direct people to the right places. And they are in all sorts of places, and we've got children and we've got young people who also in colleges and schools who also act as that voice to make sure that they know that there's somebody listening to them who is entirely independent, so they can moan about their dentist, and their dentist isn't going to give them a hard time next time they go.
Thank you. Councillor Cecil.
Yes, thank you very much for your talk. Where does waiting lists fit into all of this? We hear of long waiting lists for many treatments. Is it somebody who's on a long waiting list calls up? Are you able to accelerate something?
I think it very much depends on what it is. So as Kim said, if you ring up and actually the issue that you have isn't a GP, but actually we might be able to sort it by actually getting you referred to the right place, then yes. But I think a number of the waiting lists that people have are literally caused by demand and insufficient capacity, and that's not an issue that we can necessarily fix locally. Obviously, we can try and fix some of it by prevention, early intervention work to try and stop people getting to the point where they need a service or they get to crisis point. But actually, and actually that's the way we manage some of that demand, but that's kind of that's something that's going to be done over a long period of time. So actually, in terms of managing waiting lists, that it's a really complex area, but actually it's not going to be a quick fix for something that we can do. And there are a number of different agencies, including kind of whether it's national, whether it's NHS England, whether it's the ICB that have an involvement in that in terms of how resources are used, and how people on waiting lists are responded to.
I think if I may just add into that, and possibly Councillor Coxhill as well, might wish to comment. I think one of the benefits of what we've seen I mean, I've been following this through the past year, and I remember a very graphic presentation I think we had over at Corringham almost a year ago, probably now, and it sort of ties in with this one front door and then getting through. And I think part of the success of this has been and is going to be that it will actually people will avoid even registering on the waiting list, because they'll be able to find their point of service a lot quicker, because instead of sort of ringing up a GP and waiting for a GP to decide and blah, 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 all the paraphernalia of that, they're actually talking to, I was going to say non-professional people, which is not meant to be a criticism, but they'll have people who will actually say, actually, yeah, well, to get your problem, you need to get hold of so-and-so, and so we'll arrange an appointment and off you go. So hopefully a lot of those people will circumvent the system. I don't know, George, whether you...
No, I think it's a whole different model of care, and I know it's very odd. I haven't intervened too much, mainly given the role I played over the year previously. Don't feel comfortable scrutinising or commenting on something that was involved executively on. But it is a really fantastic different way of working, and it's the groundwork that really transforming the care and the system. And I really do recommend members actually getting a bit involved and getting their teeth in to realise how does the system work. If there is something similar that could be recreated, that we know HOSC had it last Corringham, did something similar again, Chair. I think that session you agreed it was a really fantastic session. I remember you coming to full council asking a question straight away. I think it's really, really, really good, and you get to grips. It's one of the core strategies this council has, and actually seeing the pillar of that and actually getting involved is something I do urge members to do.
I think one of the benefits of being an independent is that I can be apolitical, and I know that colleagues on one side of the room may feel that they've inherited some poison chalices when they took over in May, but I certainly don't think anybody could be critical of this particular chalice. I think it is nationwide leading. I know, and I've been told that there are a lot of people are looking at what we're doing, and it is to everybody's credit, whatever your political persuasion, and also the team that are engaged. It really is a showcase policy for this borough that we should be immensely proud of. So I will just answer a couple of questions which are sort of on the mechanics of it, and I'm sure anybody listening geographically may well have thought when you talked about how it was broken up, and I'm thinking of sort of communities, rural communities. So you mentioned the four areas, which are relatively urban. So I just made a note. So how do we plan to cope when I lump them together? East Tilbury, West Tilbury and Linford, for example, and then again the sort of hobnob communities of Orsett, Horndon and Bulford, who would probably not want to be lumped in with anybody else. And it may well be that they sort of get their own mini system, but that's one thing that struck me.
I would think I'd say that kind of the way of organising is probably something that we do, and hopefully if you're living in those areas, what you'll notice is just things will be better for you, rather than worrying whether you're lumped into a particular area or not. Obviously, in terms of the community involvement or investment boards, then they will probably be kind of on kind of more numerous footprints, because actually just to have 4 just wouldn't represent communities better. So, and how many and how that's done will be kind of one of the things that is discussed. But yeah, I would hope that, yeah, it was just that we obviously will, and Kim and Gina will kind of be key to this, will be making sure that we listen to the priorities of all communities, not just those that are urban, and work out actually from a person's point of view how we deliver what that individual wants regardless of where they live. But because obviously we've got 4 primary care networks and they do cover like Horndon or Alsett, or then that's just how we've kind of managed that geography.
I know those communities do sort of sometimes feel a little bit isolated, and it is, at least if we discuss it and point it out, you're not forgotten, you're very much part of the plan. My other question was relative to the same thing, and you mentioned how the council will be supporting these micro-industries and whatever. In practical terms, what does that involve? Is it what rates and or providing premises, or what are the actual mechanics of helping?
Yeah, I have what we call a micro enterprise development manager, but it's a post who works with people who are interested in setting up a micro enterprise and takes them through the process of how to do so. So we don't provide premises. I mean, they are independent businesses, but we provide them with kind of support and guidance in terms of how to set up that business and what to require. And then obviously, because they are actually providing something that we also need in terms of a service, then actually we then work with, whether it's our social care professionals, to actually make sure that they actually offer out those micro enterprises to people when they go out as an option to them when they're actually identifying what services people need. So it's more support in terms of how to set up, and also then working with them to make sure that they've got everything they need, and any issues, say for example with payments, etc., we can help them with.
Excellent, love that practical support. And my third question, I'm going to invite Councillor Hooper has been able to join us at an earlier previous meeting, so I'm grateful, Councillor Hooper, for you making the time to turn up. And I know this is on your watch now, having sort of stepped into Councillor Coxall's shoes, and I know that you two have had a great many discussions, which is really good to see. And so rather than give you a final question, I'll actually bounce it over to Councillor Hooper. Some pretty astute budgeting here for the year that's just gone, where you managed to deliver a 2.674, let's get it all in, underspend, which in this day and age is remarkable. And I see that the projected saving at the moment for the current financial year is, I think it's about 1.6. So that's the good. Can we be assured that this, you know, we're going to move into a new year. We're going to be talking very shortly about a new budget for 2025-26, if my maths works out properly. We know we've got to make savings. We know we've already made savings in some obvious places. I wouldn't want to see any of this work jeopardised by an accountant's red pen. So I suppose all I would ask, as someone having input into the budget process for next year, that can you offer us some comfort that this will be a priority going forwards to support this fantastic scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Spate. Yes, I've had a number of conversations with Councillor Coxall, which I've really valued, and I think we're both on the same page in what we're trying to do. In terms of the strategy in saving money, it shows the strategy is working. And the last thing I want to do is to put that strategy at risk. In terms of budget cuttings and savings, I would be very concerned if we make many more cuts to the structure that we have in place, because I think it continues to deliver better services at better costs and actually saves the council money. It is unique, I have to say, across local authorities that councils save money on their social care budget. Most councils are well overspent by 5, 10, 15% and more. But Thurrock is a leading light, I think, in doing things the right way. So I hope I've answered your question.
You have indeed, and I mean, it's interesting. I know there is a huge amount of pressure now on children's next year, so one hopes that, although it's different, you know, there are similarities, and we'll see that. So to give as a portfolio holder, this is the report in your name. Have you any other summary comments you wish to make? And then we can let Kerry go having a very good presentation to us this evening. So, Councillor Hooper again.
No, I think we just want to keep supporting the strategy. We hopefully have some further news about funding in the future very shortly. And I just want to make sure that what I'm trying to do, along with Councillor Cockshaw and hopefully Councillor Arnold, is continue to support this approach. And hopefully it's a cross-party approach, not just a political football. Thank you.
Thank you. Has everybody else had their say on this issue? So to that point, we'll move to a recommendation. I always find recommendations somewhat strange, so I've slightly penned my own, which I will give you the formal version of it. I would like to recommend that the recommendation is this committee has had oversight of the development of the Better Care Together Thurrock Integrated Care Strategy and noted the 2023-24 budget. Does anybody support that recommendation? Thank you. I suppose, do we need a seconder? I suppose we do. Does anybody want to second that? Councillor Cockshaw, thank you. Brilliant. And Kerry, thank you so much. And please take, and I think most members here this evening, and indeed our co-opter members, are really, it's nice to have something that we can be proud of. And yeah, we've all got questions, we've all got fears, as Councillor Johnson touched on. Risk is always there on everything that we ever do. But if you could just pass on my thanks, and I'm sure colleagues, to all members of your team for as I say, a leading light part of our council. Thank you. Sorry, we will now move on to item 8, item 7, I do apologise, which is the children and young people referral to treatment, which has come out of comments that were made at a recent meeting. And I would ask Nikki Abbott to just introduce yourself and what you're about, and then deliver your report.
Thank you, Councillor Spate. Good evening, everybody. So my name's Nikki Abbott. I'm the Managing Director of Women and Children's Services at Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust. I was last at this meeting just over 6 months ago to provide you all with an update on our maternity services, and I thought I would just mention some very good news on that front ahead of presenting around children. So members might be aware that we've had some conditions on our licence for maternity services placed by the Care Quality Commission relating to maternity services at Basildon Hospital, something called a Section 31 condition. And I'm really pleased to say that the CQC have agreed that we've met all of the standards required such that they're able to lift that condition from our service. So that's really positive piece of news around maternity services at Basildon. So following on from that, I'll talk to you this evening about waiting times for children, waiting either for outpatient appointments or for surgery across Mid and South Essex. So I've written a short paper which you've all hopefully had sight of. So just to be clear, we measure waiting times from the moment a GP refers a patient to our services until they have either a definitive treatment or it's decided they don't need any treatment and they're discharged. Prior to COVID, the waiting time requirement on all NHS services was that we were aiming at 18-week referral to treatment times. That has been, feels like a very distant memory because since the pandemic, I'm sure you're all aware the significant increase in all waiting times of all varieties for health services across the NHS have gone up significantly. Also, just to be clear, I'm talking about children up until the date that they have their 16th birthday. So we obviously have sets of data on all of the adult position, but what I've come to talk to you about is those that have not yet had their 16th birthday. So in the NHS, as part of the recovery from COVID, there's been something put in place called the Elective Recovery Fund, and that has been focused very much on treating the very, very longest waiters. And as we move through the months and years, that maximum waiting time that was once 18 weeks, that got as high as at least 2 years, is being pushed down a bit and down a bit and down a bit every year. The current intention is to get to a point in the NHS where by this March we are seeing the vast majority of people within 65 weeks of referral. So very much longer than anything that any of us saw prior to COVID. Thankfully, children haven't made up a significant proportion of those over 65 week and prior to that 78 week waiters. And so what that's meant is this sort of targeted money from the NHS, not a lot of it's been spent on children because they already had shorter waiting times than adults. So as of last year and then this year, we have actually been able to secure some elective recovery funding for children. And as a trust have set ourselves really quite ambitious target that by the end of March 2025, that we will be achieving a 26-week waiting time for the vast majority of children. So still worse than pre-COVID, but significantly better than we have seen. And actually, this will mean waiting times for children will be many months shorter than waiting times for adults. So in the paper I've written, I've tried to describe what we find the current position to be across the trust. So I've included in there children waiting for both the medical children's services, which are the ones that I manage, and the surgical children's services, which are managed by someone else in the organisation, but we of course maintain oversight of them within children's services. So you'll see that as of the 22nd of August, there were 7 children waiting over 78 weeks, 242 over 65 weeks, and just over 1,000 waiting over a year. And within your pack, I've broken that down into those that are waiting for some sort of outpatient appointment. So this doesn't mean that they haven't had an appointment necessarily, but maybe they're going through medical treatment or they're going away and considering whether surgical treatment is right for them. And then a table of about 500 children who are actually waiting for some sort of surgical intervention. Section 4.1 of the paper describes how the waiting list is broken down by weight band, and then it also compares what that looks like for the trust as to what that looks like specifically for children within Thurrock. So the pattern for Thurrock is very similar to the pattern that we see across the whole of Mid and South Essex. I've also put in there what the differential is across our 3 hospital sites. And I'm aware Councillor Spate was invited to a meeting that I hosted around our neonatal unit, and that was where we presented the fact that there are differing waiting times across our 3 separate sites. So you will see that across Basildon Hospital, the number of children waiting is significantly higher than the numbers waiting at Broomfield and South End, although the proportions are reasonably similar. I say that with the exception of the tail of the very longest waiters, which is clearly a much higher number at Basildon than it is at the other 2 sites. So what we're currently working towards is that by the end of this month, we will have cleared all of those children that are waiting over 52 weeks. So no child will have not had a definitive treatment or a decision to discharge after some form of intervention within a year by the end of this month. And then we're looking to halve that again down to 26 weeks by the end of March. To do that, we've put on a number of additional day case theatre lists and outpatient clinics, which have been funded via the Elective Recovery Fund. So we're currently going through a process of just really making sure that the very longest waiters are brought into any extra clinics and any extra operating. Some of our surgical services are running additional operating sessions on weekends so that they can get through large volumes of children at a time. The thing that makes it a little bit more difficult with children is that we don't have dedicated surgical facilities for children on the Basildon Hospital site. So what we do is we turn our entire day surgery unit over to children for a day every so often, and that obviously just requires quite a bit more organisation to make happen. But when we run a Saturday, there aren't any adults there, and we can utilise the whole space for children. So it just makes it a bit more difficult to do, not impossible, but a bit more tricky. I've got some concerns about whether we're going to be able to meet our own very challenging target. The best I can say to you this evening is we're going to give it our very best shot and do as much as we can. And what we will do is we will bring down the very, very longest waits to something much closer to 26 weeks, even if we don't quite get there. We will consider and speak to families about whether they're prepared to travel to one of our other sites, if that's what we need to do in order to treat the very longest waiting children. And I think that's it from my paper. I've added one footnote at the end. As councillors, you may be aware that we have been proposing to redesignate one of our neonatal units as a level 1 special care baby unit. And I've referenced that on here because those are the kind of decisions we're having to make. If I want to redirect more resource on an ongoing basis towards children that are waiting for appointments through our paediatric service, we've got to work out how we best use our resources in a way that brings benefit to the largest number of children. And so we think that a redesignation of the unit at Southend will enable that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor.
No, thank you, Chair. No, thank you for the report. I think it's, I'm just drilling really on the target, of especially the target for the end of this month. Just curious, when was the target set? In terms, do you know when that was actually, was it something that was decided in the summer or was it towards the start of the year? Just mindful, because that puts still, just curious if though you may have your own concerns that you may not get there, just mindful how close do you think we are actually going to get there in the end to that target? Because that is, I agree, very ambitious to say that we're going to cut, just quickly, maybe find these 300 extra appointments straight away within. Looking at the data, I'm not going to assume that it's just we've decided with a month ago, but just trying to get my head around how deliverable that is.
So the process, we've had to apply for the elective recovery funding process. That in itself has been tricky. I'd say probably in about June, we were told you've got the money that you've requested. Which is not as early as, you know, we would have liked it to have been by the end of March. So we had the full financial year to have a good run at this. So we haven't had the money for as long as we would have liked to have done. I think that, I mean, you can see from the position at the end, on the 22nd of August, we already had 1,000 patients in total over 52 weeks. I have no concerns that we will have, all of the ones that are on the non-admitted pathway, which is about half of them, I think will all be treated. The issue is, of course, some of those are waiting. So they might be waiting, for example, for an ENT appointment. And they get their ENT appointment and they say, yes, you do need to have your tonsils taken out. And then, of course, we need to arrange an operation. So there is always a risk that some of those on the non-admitted waiting times flip into the admitted part of this. So I think we'll get at least halfway there to what we're saying we'll do by the end of September. And I think we will, as an absolute minimum, achieve below 40 weeks by the end of March. we said 26 weeks, and we're really going to push ourselves to try and make sure that we get there.
No, I appreciate your honesty here. This is one thing I used to get quite frustrated by, was I'd get told one target and then would never reach it, and then it would go out the window. I think I'd rather be on it, people be honest to us and actually say, right, if we get 40, it's an improvement. It's not where we want to be, but at least you're honest about it. And I think something the committee should, I think it's quite welcoming at least to say that that's the position we're in. I wish you the very best of luck. Hopefully we do get to that point and we do actually crack down. But I think, yeah, I think it's something we know it's a national issue, but especially I think most of us just have that interest here in Thurrock and seeing where we are. So I just finally really appreciate the honesty on it.
Any other questions from Councillor Rigby?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned at the end about offering to go to other hospitals. Is that available at the moment or something that you're planning in?
It's something that we don't do very often. Despite being a merged organisation, we still in the main run as 3 reasonably separate hospitals. So even things like notes and IT systems are different at the 3 other sites. And we find commonly people don't really want to travel. But we have different capacity on the Brumfield site, for example. I have some dedicated surgical space at Brumfield that I don't have at Basildon. And so I think we will have no option but to offer families that are waiting, particularly for the surgical interventions, to travel to Brumfield. And so we don't really do it very much at the moment. I'm determined that we're going to make some real inroads into waiting times for children, and so I think we'll have to offer it. What the uptake will be a different story, however.
Thank you. I mean, Brumfield isn't really that far to go. I mean, if your child's waiting for an operation, I would think that most people would make arrangements to try and get there, I would think. But I'm amazed they don't ask for it more, or maybe they're not aware of that option, do you think?
So you'd be surprised at how reluctant people can be to, I'm getting some nods back there, to travel. I mean, particularly, the children of Basildon clearly in the main are going to it's a more deprived area, so it could be more difficult for people to travel. You'd have to be referred to another clinician, and so people are always worried about getting lost somewhere in that pathway. But we've got to look to do something different that makes this more joined up, so that actually, if that's where we can provide the surgery and you can get it done 3 months sooner, then like you, yes, I'd travel, but not everybody does.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised by that. And also, with adult waiting lists, a lot of the figures are slightly distorted by procedures being cancelled due to other medical issues, so the patient may not have lost enough weight, or their diabetes isn't under control and things like that, and then their waiting list is extended, so it's even making the waiting list look worse than they actually are. Is that affected by children, or is that not really a factor that comes into the waiting list for them?
It's much less of a factor for children because, of course, the kinds of if we're undertaking surgery, generally they're not having to lose weight, etc. But of course, they will have other reasons for wanting to delay their surgery, particularly those at the older end that are waiting for exams or, school holidays, etc. So, but yeah, there's much less of a cohort of patients that are having to have something else done while they're waiting.
So you wouldn't say it makes a significant factor in the figures that we've got?
I don't believe so, no.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, I know Councillor wants to speak as well, but yes. Okay, yes. No, off you go.
Thank you. You will be surprised at how many patients won't travel. And with some of the parents, we get this a lot. It's because they are living in deprived areas. You can have single mums that are relying on food banks. They haven't got the money for fares. And it isn't just getting their child there for the surgery, it's visiting them backwards and forwards. And if they haven't got any money, and you can't, people, I know this isn't your fault, but you can't offer a service to somebody who physically has no means of getting there. You can't commission a service or anything else on the assumption they must know somebody. And that's where these people fall through the gap. One of the other things is that I want to say was that we've had lots of parents who have been cancelled, their children have been cancelled their surgeries at Basildon and or Southend because they're going to need some kind of plastic skin grafts, things after the surgery. The bed is there for them to have the surgery, but there isn't a space for them to be moved on to do the next bit. So until they can match them up, they tend to, I can understand that, it's not a criticism, but it's very hard for parents to understand who have been on a list, and then the actual surgery can be done, but they can't take that chance that there's not going to be the next bit at the right time. So there is that bit of people falling through. And another thing that we often get is patients, children who are betwixt and between their local hospital and Great Ormond Street. And it is so difficult, it's so frustrating. We can navigate some of those systems and we end up sitting in the office with our heads in our hands trying to find someone to just talk to these parents, and neither will take full responsibility. So if they're under Great Ormond Street for something, for anything, and they roll up at Basildon A&E, they're told, but you're under Great Ormond Street. But this isn't anything to do with their condition. No, but you are under Great Ormond Street. But they haven't got an A&E. And the times we get these stories, and the frustration is that you can't find that person who will liaise for them. PALS at Great Ormond Street will deal with Great Ormond Street, and PALS at Basildon will deal with that. But it's that bit in the middle when they're being just bounced around, and I think that's something that really, really needs to be looked at, because we can't find anyone. We get so frustrated. So, you know, there are things, and there are long waiting lists, and we do get patients, parents that phone up and they are really distressed, because there's nothing worse than having a child that's suffering with something or other. And obviously there's nothing we can't do anything other than listen to them, note it, raise it at any particular meetings about the waiting time, but this makes more sense to us now. And if you don't mind, the only other thing is neuro's not on here. So are they on a different waiting list somewhere else? So the neuro services? No, or have I missed them?
So it comes under paediatrics as a general specialty. So anyone waiting for a neurology appointment is within those numbers that say paediatric service.
One thing that possibly may be helpful is, and we had the great presentation from Kerry talking about how Thurrock's inventing methods, and I know Kim is very much involved in that, and I can see the frustration there coming through with you. But again, maybe offering, you know, again, like Councillor Cockshall, I welcome the honesty of you coming here tonight and telling it as it is, because that's not something that we're used to coming out of your trust, and you know, I do welcome it, and it's a step in the right direction. And again, I think Thurrock could probably help. Part of the problem to me seems that we draw these strange geographical lines relating to health. So if you're a parent living in, I don't know, Ockenden or Aveley or Purfleet, you've got a number of perfectly good hospitals a few miles down the road, either whether you go go west into London, or whether you go over the river into Darrant Valley and whatever. And we talk about that. I can fully see why somebody who lives, you know, even who lives in Grays, doesn't particularly want to hike all the way over to Chelmsford. I mean, while it is probably only, 25 miles, 30 miles, it's still, on a good day, getting through Springfield, you're talking an hour and a half. And public transport is there, but it isn't great because the railways don't link that way. And I, as I say, I don't know who at some point in time sat down and drew the map. But is there any possibility that where you have a particular long waiting list, then it may not be that wait. Do you explore the possibility of, or compare that waiting list at Darren Valley or at one of the hospitals in East London or whatever, and we'll scratch your back, you'll scratch ours, or however an arrangement could be, because just to put it into that triangle of Basildon, Broomfield, and Southend, really not good for a big geographical percentage of Thurrock.
That's a very good point. I guess we're looking at what we can do as an organisation first. But you're right, that's not necessarily how the public see themselves. They think I could go in either direction. But I guess we're looking at our responsibilities as a trust as to treating the children that have been referred to us. But yeah, not averse to considering something different.
We have these layers of health service provision, which frustrates me enormously. And we have this ethereal body called the Integrated Care Board. And I get exactly what you've just said. We're a hospitals trust and we're doing the best we can and we're trying to do this. But sitting above you, you've got a layer of very highly paid, very good professional people, we're told, top of the game and whatever. Maybe you could, very kindly as a trust, and I'd be happy to endorse it, bounce, can you help us out by coming up with a different solution to them? Because, the words Integrated Care Board shouldn't just be that geographical boundary. It should be integrated care across the board of the whole of Thurrock, so whatever. And I think, Councillor Hooper, you wanted, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yes, thank you. Again, thank you for your honesty. It's really, really pleasant to actually have. What would make it better? What support would you want from government or local authorities to make this better? Because I think, obviously, a 64-week waiting time is not acceptable. And I'm really after that's 0 to 17 weeks waiting time. What would make it better?
Okay, big question. I guess two things more broadly. Number one is the priority given to services for children, when routinely in nearly all conversations we talk about adults and then we talk about children as a bolt-on afterwards. So I guess as the Managing Director for Women and Children, I'd really put in a plug for thinking about children's services first. As a council, the thing that would help reduce my waiting list would be to prevent the demand in the first place. And probably the single biggest driver of demand for children's services are respiratory illnesses. So smoking, housing, and pollution management within the borough are things that in the longer term are going to lead to a healthier population, which is going to prevent significant demand on these services going forwards.
If you want to write to me with some thoughts about how we can make that better, I will go and take that away. Because obviously, like all of us, I think we were shocked to see that the number of people that were waiting 50 to 60 weeks to actually see a consultant was really, really quite concerning. And I want to do what we can to help support the trust and our young people to get the appointments they should need. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. I would absolutely echo that. There is, we do get into conflict as bodies and organisations, and we're all protective about our own little empires. And we've got, and in a way, we often talk about silo working within organisations, but there can also be silo working, that organisations then wrap themselves in. So as Councillor Hooper said, and it was really good what you just said, I was trying to remember the exact phraseology so we can share that with our colleagues on our respective. We're trying to do our little bit here. Councillor Rigby is about to head up our obesity task force with, no expectations of, taking ounces of children in the short term, but building a platform that we're going to be able to actually do something practical. And I'm sure colleagues would love your support when they go to other committees, whether it's ONS or whether it's Cabinet or whatever, and say, look, we can actually help Forget let's get into conflict, let's get in a screaming match. You know, we can actually work together more. And I do genuinely believe if we can start to break down these, you know, this council is not the enemy of your trust. I promise you that. A few of us, like me, every now and again gob off, and I apologise for it when it happens. It's meant by passion and whatever. But underlying all that, we care for the people of Thurrock, and we know that you're there to help the people of Thurrock, and we should all be on the same side. So we will do that. So anybody else got anything else they wish to add? So we don't have to do any more than note your words. And again, I thank you for coming in. Could I ask you, because I like to have something practical as a legacy of this, and I think you've set yourself an incredibly difficult target. An incredibly difficult target for the 6 months thing, but I wish, like Councillor Coxall, I wish you well with it. Could I ask that you don't necessarily have to attend, you can submit in writing if you wish, if you've enjoyed your evening in Thurrock, please come and join us again. But say we have a meeting on the 4th of March, which sort of ties in with your 6-month target. I think it would be really helpful to see that same report effectively, look at how the figures have changed, and hopefully you will have made giant strides. If you haven't, then maybe we can look at how we can help you a little bit more. But we're putting it in a realistic time frame, and we've got a practical outcome from tonight's report. So if you could do that, if members think that's a good idea, yeah, we will do it. So once again, thank you very, very much indeed. Really appreciate you coming over. And by all means, we've not got a lot to talk about, but feel free to pack your bags and get off wherever it is you're going to.
Thank you very much.
Right, we're going to come to the work programme, but I just briefly, and having Cal has just given me a very nice list of what the numbers are on item agendas. I was going to ask Councillor Rigby, I know you've had an initial meeting as a set-up meeting, and I'm not expecting you to say, if you don't want to say anything, don't say anything, but just, you know, to even nothing less than to get our best wishes as you embark on your task and finish group on obesity in children. Is there anything that you wish to just note at this meeting?
So I've had an initial meeting with Sharon Stoltz and we've laid out a plan. So at the moment, 4 stakeholder meetings have been arranged and the 5th one is yet to be arranged. So we've got quite a good range. We've got one meeting where there'll be mainly sort of youth groups involved, younger people. And then we've got one with sort of primary care coming along, and I think it's activity centres and school representatives, and I think the ICB as well to that one. And then there's another meeting set up with maternity providers as well, and then there will be one at a family hub. We're yet to get that arranged. So the first meeting is this Thursday, and then next week we've got our first just committee meeting just with the members of the committee.
I know it was in good hands. Well done and thank you. That's really, really good, really encouraging. So I've now got my order of things. So I think we wrap it. I'll just ask my boss. We're just wrapping up the work programme. Sorry? Can't hear you.
Lucy is going to take us through the work programme.
Exactly. There you go. I know when I'm told what to do. Right, over to you.
Yeah, so just briefly going through the work programme. We've got October's meeting all kind of set out, I think. I know Claire's been in contact with councillors just to kind of get your views on what you want included in the provision report. And following on, November, December are laid out as well. It's really just whether you'd like to add anything, if there's anything you feel hasn't been covered. Obviously, I'm just subbing for Claire tonight, so anything you do suggest, I'll take away and report back to Claire, and she can add to the work programme. But anything you'd like to add or any comments, happy to take them.
Well, I'll chip in for October, and it only needs to be the brief report that we'd agreed from Sheila regarding home to school trial. It is actually going to come up later in the year. In fact, it's in November. So I don't expect it to be a full report or anything like that, but I would, you know, we'd agreed it was right thing to ask the thing. We will possibly, as councillors, get more feedback now that kids are going back to school. Hopefully we won't, but you never know. But if we could just stick that on there. And I did wonder, do we have, we've got 2 reports from Mr. Wake, one of which is a matter of high public concern in November, which is the estates review and proposals, and it is designated as high public concern. We've got through tonight relatively quickly, looking at the clock. I don't see, I mean, special needs provision, massively important, really good. Pupil and place plans shouldn't take too long. At the risk of trying to run a risk of having a very long meeting, and Councillor Hooper may have some thoughts on this. I just wonder whether it'd be worth, as it is of high public concern, bringing forward the estates review and proposals, which I imagine relates to, I don't know, general practitioners, IMCs, and probably also hospital. Councillor Hooper, any thoughts?
I'm happy to bring it forward. I mean, I know that Ian was working on a report. Should be ready by the end of September, early October.
Well, if members are happy, if you're happy, we have a sort of ongoing briefing talk between the Democratic Services Support Scrutiny Support Team, and obviously I speak to the various directors. We have a little triangular meeting. So if it can be done without causing undue concern, would people be happy if we did bring that one forward? Because I think it's an issue that we're all likely to get asked questions about, buildings, fabric, and all that. So yeah, Councillor Heath.
Thank you. I think as long as we've got enough time to speak about the SEN and the transport and everything, because we haven't discussed any of that in the last few meetings that we've been in. It's all about health and social care. So as long as we've got time to, you know, discuss all that, then yeah, I'm happy.
Well, if it gives you comfort, I'm happy to leave it where it is. Or what we could do, Ian being a very nice chap, and the fact that he'll be going away from us. I mean, we could even put it on there as a, you know, and literally leave it to a decision on the night. If things go and he's got time to do it, we get it out of the way. Because he's spent a lot of work on it, and the danger is he's going to be gone before we have the opportunity to ask him the questions. That's my number one fear, is we won't get a chance to quiz him and he's moved on. But if we could, I'm sure he wouldn't mind saying, if time permits, we move on to it. If time doesn't, we put it back to the following month. And that gives you the comfort, absolutely, that SEN will get the time it deserves. Everybody happy? Excellent. Well, at 8:57 on my clock, thank you very much for your attendance, and we will all meet again another day. Thank you, everybody. Have a productive meeting.